So my role, aside from just launching the program and being responsible for its day-to-day operation, is really to be a strategic thinker in our district. And so I look for opportunities for virtual instruction to help solve some of the challenges that we have. In the wake of the recession, we were a way for students to have access to courses if a specific course couldn't be offered at their school site. We were a way to make that opportunity available to students if there were insufficient enrollment numbers or limitations on the allocations in a subject area. We're a strategy for helping our district cover classes when a certified teacher can't be hired. And we're also a way to expand college coursework opportunities for students so that we are able to make sure that the highly qualified and certified teachers that we have that can teach college level coursework are accessible to all students throughout our school district.
So it sounds like what your school covers kind of can ebb and flow in terms of adding new courses and that sort of thing. And obviously the number of people utilizing it definitely can change.
It's a little bit of a challenge for our district and for my team because we very much are subject to the whims of teenagers and to just local conditions. So, if we're in a situation where we are struggling to find teachers locally in a subject area, then we are often a way to expand the pool of teachers because my teachers don't necessarily have to be local. So I can use folks who live around the state and even sometimes outside the state to provide certified teachers in hard to staff subject areas. So it's, I sometimes joke with my staff that we're sort of like the elastic in the Thanksgiving pants, if you will. We kind of expand and contract to meet whatever the needs are. And I try to attract teachers who hold multiple areas of certification so that my people kind of are the constant, but the teaching assignments that they have can kind of ebb and flow with the needs of the school district.
One of my favorite words for 2020 is pivot. So I joked with some of my colleagues with the Friends, the Friends episode where they were carrying the couch up and, pivot. So, that it's a great word for 2020 where everybody's having to pivot, just depending on even local, as you mentioned, local conditions. And so that's really interesting to know, especially that you can pull your resources, not necessarily from Florida, but from other areas. So how long would you say that you've been using just text to speech?
So we've been using text to speech in our program for probably about 7 or 8 years. We began to be more intentional about assessing the accessibility of our online courses at about that time. We were aware that we had students with a variety of needs, whether they required special education accommodations or we have pockets in our school district where there are high concentrations of students who are English language learners. Mm-hmm. And so, again, because we knew that students needed to take an online course for graduation, and we knew that often we were the only school that offered some specific courses in our district, we really felt a sense of responsibility to make sure that the technology wasn't a barrier for our learners and that our doors were as open as they could be. So using a tool like text-to-speech allowed us to support the needs of students who needed or learned best when text was read aloud. And we also found along the way that students who were just struggling readers, who weren't identified for specific supports, appreciated the opportunity to have text read to them to make sure that they were comprehending all of the material.
So it's a good accommodation tool, basically.
Yeah.
Would you say, what would you say made you decide to use the ReadSpeaker suite of tools for text-to-speech versus, you know, another competitor? And would you say that the ease of implementation and support was what you were expecting or better, or how would you dive into that?
So we, as a school district, had relied heavily over, gosh, the last probably 20 years on Mac technology. And so there were some programs that we tended to turn to just naturally to read text aloud, but they did not integrate with our learning management system.
And which learning management system do you use, if you don't mind?
Sure, we're a Canvas district and have been for 8 years. And so one of my tech folks happened to be at InstructureCon and visited a booth in the vendor hall and struck up a conversation with some members of your team at that event and came back and said, you know, I really think we should take a deeper look at this specific tool because it will integrate with the learning management system, meaning that it would be able to do a better job of reading all of the content in the online courses. And in looking at that then with the rest of the team and my special education staff members, we also were impressed with the number of languages that it could translate to. So we saw some additional ways that it could support populations of learners just above and beyond students who had special education accommodations. And so it was also super easy to plug in. And my tech team really is very conservative around the number of new tools they recommend or really allow us to adopt because it becomes problematic for them to support them if they don't work well. Mm-hmm. But my tech guy who first encountered ReadSpeaker at InstructureCon likes to say that he doesn't actually know your tech support number or how to really get help. And that's a good thing in his book, because if he hasn't had to look that up very often, then that's a great thing. It means that he can set that tool and forget about it.
Right. And you made a good point too. Text-to-speech isn't necessarily just for those that need accommodations. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, as ReadSpeaker likes to, you know, look at the market, it's a universal tool. You know, even for those that have had to pivot to online learning because of local conditions, it can just be exhausting being on the screen all day. And so it's a good alternative to kind of mix that up. Would you say that you've utilized the tool differently now versus pre-COVID?
Absolutely. We, in Florida anyway, we were a little bit of an outlier because we began planning for instructional continuity nearly a month before any of our surrounding districts. We began thinking about what would happen if we needed to close and taking inventory of our content, our tools, and really trying to make the best decision about how to support a system of 77,000 students and nearly 5,000 staff members. And one of the interesting things was that we really felt that the web reader portion of ReadSpeaker not only was a solid tool for us to, again, support special education and English language learners, but we had to really bring on almost 40,000 elementary school students. And so knowing that we could use that tool to read aloud text to them, because they, you know, many of them are developing readers. They haven't quite tipped the balance from learning to read to reading to learn. We felt like that was going to be an important piece of what we could offer our families, because we recognized that we were going to encounter parents who weren't used to supporting online learning, were working from home, or supporting multiple students learning at home. And so the ability to have young learners have the screen read to them so that then they could engage in instruction, we felt left us in a little bit more solid place, and helped us feel better about the plan that we were developing in that period.
Well, and you also, you know, I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier too, you have, you know, language learners. And so, you know, sometimes the younger generation, their parents may not speak English as well. And so that tool, you know, to have something read aloud to them, you know, when they may be in a home that is not English as a first language, might also benefit them to stay, you know, stay on par or ahead while they're learning from home. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I would add that a lot of the, you know, when we realized that this plan was going from the idea stage to implementation, it was the Friday before spring break. And we had already dismissed classes in our schools. I mean, we literally got the call from our education commissioner at 4:30 on Friday afternoon. So our ability to send home things like heritage language dictionaries, all of that was gone, because the kids had already boarded the bus and they were off for spring break. And many of the strategies that we use in our school buildings are very people-centered. That is, we have resource teachers and instructional assistants who help provide translation support and work with our classroom teachers to close the gap between what we call tier 1 instruction, the instruction we're providing to all students, and the needs of the students. So when we thought about students who were learning from home, we realized we were not going to have those two primary tools that we use in our classrooms every day. So having technology that could help close that gap, that could translate to their native language, and have that turn on and off, and then a tool that could, you know, allow us to read in the target language English, you know, aloud, would give us a better opportunity to make that instruction possible. And then our people who know the needs of these students and know their learning styles could follow up with supports using tools like Zoom and additional supplemental pieces. But it gave us a good feeling to know that that very first exposure they were going to have to this new way of learning that turned out to last the rest of the year would have the tools embedded that could make that learning accessible. They were not an afterthought. They were very much with us the whole way through.
Would you say that some of that would be one of the reasons why you chose to implement ReadSpeaker kind of across the board? From what I understand, you've kind of picked and choose some of your third-party vendors to be system-wide or county-wide. Is that, what would you say was one of the top reasons you decided to have ReadSpeaker as one of those few vendors that you kind of implemented across the board?
Well, I would say that it was, again, the ease of use. Like we had, because eSchool is pretty large anyway before COVID, you know, we were serving literally like 20,000 students a year through our program. We knew this tool worked. We knew that it was reliable, and we knew that it was a single tool that could meet the needs of a variety of learners. It wasn't a piecemeal, you know, situation where we were taking this tool for this group and this tool for that group. So when because it has become an ingrained part of my school, my virtual school's way of thinking and planning, it seemed natural to us to extend that. And when we reached out to ReadSpeaker to talk about the fact that we were developing this plan and we wanted to ask if they could and were prepared to scale up for going, to like 3 times the size, but potentially the tool being hit with a lot more users.
Right.
It was not going to be 3 times the number of users actually using it. It was more likely to be like 20 times the number of users because of so many elementary students and a much broader cross-section of our students. And the telling thing was just the complete lack of hesitation on your part. Other partners in different aspects of our operation really needed to go back and, think about whether they could handle that demand, because it was becoming clear that this was going to be something that was going to be a national situation. But your company didn't hesitate. They said, absolutely, go for it, install it at the root level, do what you need to do to make this work for your system. And that was really reassuring when we were considering all of the different aspects, because what we essentially did was take the operation of our school and really adjust it to meet the needs of an entire system. And we had the support of a lot of district departments, but they were 100% leaning on us to guide them and say, we're going to need this tool for this purpose, and we'll configure things in this way because this, and this. And they didn't second guess us. So we had to get it right. And knowing that we had a tool like ReadSpeaker that we knew would work was important for us, because we felt a big sense of responsibility. It was very nerve-wracking to be kind of calling the plays for the whole team as opposed to just the school.
Now, being one of the top 3 digital principals of the year, I would say that you have a lot of knowledge in this. And I guess, what advice would you give those that are still looking to integrate text to speech into their educational platform? What should they be looking at? What challenges does text to speech really solve for them? I mean, we've touched on a lot, in terms of accommodations and in terms of, English as a first language and that sort of thing. But what advice would you give those they're just now looking to implement text to speech?
I would say 2 things. The first one is look for a company that will let you test their product in your instance. We've tried a lot of products in a lot of different areas in our program that didn't work as advertised. Salespeople will say whatever they need to say to close a deal. Something that stands out for us about ReadSpeaker was your company's willingness from the beginning to let us try it in our instance and to try it with a variety of content. So there are a number of web reader tools or text-to-speech tools that cannot, for example, read third-party content that comes in a thin Common Course cartridge. Because what we're really doing when you have a thin Common Course cartridge is the content is really living on someone else's server, and it's being displayed in your learning management system. Some tools cannot kind of pierce through that little bit of a veil in between and read that text. And so that's important. We have a large number of courses that use content in a thin Common Course cartridge configuration that were essentially invisible to other tools. So rule 1 would be ask other potential partners to prove that their product works, not just on systems they control, because it'll definitely work on the systems they configure and control, but on your system with your users. And then the second thing is look for partners that check in and really aren't afraid to have some honest conversations about unmet needs or challenges. Not every partnership that we've had has been smooth sailing all of the time. And sometimes there are needs that maybe weren't a part of your purchasing decision, but emerge because school systems are dynamic and virtual programs are dynamic. And so companies that are committed to talk to you at more than just renewal time and check in on how things are going, we have enjoyed that aspect of our collaboration with Reed Speaker. We haven't had huge technical issues or outages or things like that, but when there were feature requests that we had or things that we wished would work a little bit differently based on feedback that we got from our users, your team was there and took notes and worked hard to help make upgrades and enhancements over time. And we've seen the way in which your tool has matured over the years, and that's been really nice to see. And that's not to say that every single item on our wish list has come to be. You guys are weighing lots of people's wish lists, but I will say that sometimes some of your other customers have come through with wish list items that we hadn't even dreamt of yet. So it's really cool.
And I think that that's the the mark of a true partnership too, is to have those conversations, because it takes that feedback from those in the field saying, this is what we really are seeing as a need, and this is what's really working, this is what's really not, and this is where we see a gap. And that partnership is what's going to make it continually be a productive partnership and a good partnership. And so, Joanne, I really can't thank you enough for taking this time to kind of do a deeper dive.
Contact us or request a free trial today.